I got to meet like smaller teams, I guess, because they were also able to go since they didn't have to fly and get hotel rooms and everything like that.
Yeah, I feel like NeoCab, we did most of our like travel and showing the game at shows like right before the pandemic,
Oh.
because we shipped in October 2019.
Hmm.
Um, no way. Yeah. Um, so right before the pandemic began, and it's a different world now. I feel like even once the Delta has like run its course, it'll still be a very different world for with all these like online conferences
Hmm.
and shows and stuff to show games at, which is probably largely a good thing,
Yeah.
to be honest. Yeah.
It gives even like people like me who just started doing this a chance to talk to more people because everyone's more open to the whole Zoom thing. And first, I wanted to ask you about your name, Patrick Ewing, because I was a big Heat fan growing up, and
Nice.
Patrick Ewing was the enemy. But did you get a lot
Yeah,
of
I mean,
people?
I actually grew up in New York, in
Oh.
Brooklyn, until I was like 10. So yeah, it's just a funny coincidence. My
Hmm.
parents, it's a family name. And then my mom is Patricia, her dad was Patrick, my dad is the
Oh,
Ewing. And so then like Patrick Ewing's like NBA career
it
began
started when you
like,
were like a kid.
yeah, like 80. So I was born in 82, and he like became like the hottest thing in the NBA. It was like because it was the first ever NBA draft
Hmm.
in 86. So he was like on the cover of Sports Illustrated, and was like inescapable with the Knicks. And so, I was like, it was a funny, I think that it probably influenced my personality in some way that like anytime I would show up anywhere, be it like kindergarten or like a restaurant reservation or something, people would be expecting
Yeah.
this like 7 foot tall, like extremely talented black dude, and I'd be like this like shrimpy
It's
little
just
white
you.
dude would show up. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
No, I had a in college in the dorms there was a Michael Jordan, but he was probably named also like we were born in '86, so he was named right before that or as it was
Yep.
happening, not thinking about it.
Yep. Yep.
Mhm.
Totally.
I want to ask you, I guess you worked on a few games and I saw Neo Cab, which I got to try at Apple Arcade because I subscribed recently.
Nice.
So I finally, it's really, I don't know, it's really cool. It's like beautiful, but the writing's really cool.
Thanks. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's what we focused on. It was definitely like a let's make a narrative first game, and let's try to make a visual novel feel as beautiful and immersive as possible. I'd say that was our goal with NeoCab.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's on Apple Arcade. It's also on Switch and Steam and Humble. Um, and yeah, I'm really proud of it. It was like a really hard process to make, like every game is, but I was with a lot of talented people. And especially the writers room, I'm really proud of how that came together and all the talented work done by the writers
Hmm.
uh, there, as well as like, yeah, the narrative design aspects. I can talk about that. There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about with NeoCab. It was definitely more than any other game I've worked on. It was like my baby.
Yeah, but that was
Yeah.
like a whole writer's room that you worked with for that one.
Yeah, it came together with my friend Robin Sloan, who I've known for many years, and he's a novelist and had real success. Like he was on the New York Times bestseller list. He wrote Mr. Penumbra's 24-hour bookstore and then Sourdough, among other things. And so we'd always wanted to work together. And I had this like it was actually the two of us like trying to come up with like an RPG source book concept,
Hmm.
and then it just like snapped. This idea of like driving a like an Uber or Lyft car in the future just kind of like appeared to us, and so it started with just him and then my friend um, Duncan Fife, who also was like friends with the Firewatch team.
Okay.
And then we had Paula Rogers, who became our managing editor and later writing lead. And yeah, Kim Belair from Sweet Baby was super instrumental. There's actually Bruno Diaz who wrote and did some narrative design. It's the like it was like a big room, and I'm leaving out a lot of people right now, but check the credits for that. But yeah, like it was cool to see that take shape gradually, and we like I definitely feels like it was a collaborative effort in terms of finding Lena's voice. And even like, I mean, when we started out, we were like, is this written in first person or second person or third person? You know, like, is this like everything was on the table, and we very gradually made a bunch of little creative decisions that led us to what we shipped. And that was really, really cool. And it was like a huge privilege to be a part of that.
No, when I first saw trailers, I think I thought it was more of a driving around game and like the story was happening around, but then it was like happening as you're driving around. But then when I actually tried it, it's like,
Yeah, it turns out it's really hard to make a driving simulator with a half decent story,
yeah.
because yeah, I mean, basically as soon as you turn driving into a game, the way you lose the game is through like immensely injuring yourself and or other people. And so the kind of the only story you can build around that is about a sociopath who doesn't care about murdering people. See also the GTA series
Yeah.
or Crazy Taxi, right? Like either you say story doesn't matter, or you have to like suspend disbelief massively. So we just decided to pull that gamey aspect out of it entirely.
Yeah. And then you worked on Firewatch too, I saw.
Yeah.
That was one game that I played that I don't know, I'm not gonna say that like nothing happened, but it wasn't like you feel like the action's coming, but it doesn't come as much, or it's more like narrative focused. But it was one of the first games that I felt like that in. I
Yeah.
think I beat it in like a weekend, but I loved it. And then the look of it is super because it was the artist is
Ollie
his name
Moss,
Moss. Yeah.
yeah, Jane Ang, Paolo Cericcio, were like instrumental to the look and feel of that game, and or the look of the visuals, I should say. And yeah, it was like a dream team to be part of. That was the first game I worked on, and I've been friends with Sean and Jake from Telltale for years. And this was like, you know, these guys were both immensely creative and had shipped or worked on in smaller capacities and then as directors of really amazing and industry changing games, especially like The Walking Dead season 1, which kind of, you know, there's sort of, I see that as like a kind of before and after point for most storytelling games. And so this was like their first opportunity to make something without really much creative oversight, just the limitations of being a small indie and following like their instincts and their best thinking. And yeah, it was an amazing process to be a part of that design as it came together, and to chip in however I could. Yeah.
And then how did you start, I guess, in games? Did you start like I think I saw something of quality testing and stuff like that, and you moved your way into this or
No, actually, that was my first games project, so I consider myself like very lucky in that regard. So basically, I was a computer programmer, but I've been a games enthusiast all my life, like all game devs and most people our age. But so I've been making little prototype games since I was like basically since I was using QBasic and then ZZT, and you know, so there was like I was always like a sort of like an indie dev back before that was a name, you know, like I used to share my games on AOL when I was like 13, 12, etc. But I'd never gotten a chance to make one for real. And all I knew was that the games industry, as a programmer, you hear the games industry is terrible and will chew you up and spit you out, and is like way more. It's like basically people say it's like sort of like 3 times the work and stress for like 1/3 of the pay, which is like changing a little bit, but largely is still true. It was certainly true when I started being an engineer. But it was always the dream. And so after I was an early engineer at Twitter for like 5 years. I was, you know, I started at that company before there was 100 people there. And when I left, there was like 3,500 people. And it was like that burnout and stress, but also like everything I learned there, where I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to do a passion project now, and I would love to work in games because this feels like a field that's constantly innovating and developing things that couldn't have been done before, which is a really exciting space to be. And so basically I told Sean and Jake, like, in any way I can be useful to Firewatch, well, to the game that ended up being Firewatch. We didn't even know we were making it first. How can I, like, let me help. So I started with doing tools programming for them, like creating the dialogue system for like writing, editing, wiring up the dialogue, translating it. And then went into gameplay programming as well, and did a little writing on the side for the game, you know, barks, wayfinding dialogue, that kind of thing, like filling in gaps. So it was absolutely like it was a really hard work for like 2 years, year and a half, maybe, I don't know. Definitely more stressful than I was even expecting to ship a game with a small team. But so worth it. I was so proud of the like output of that team, and I learned so much that I could not have dreamed of making Neo Cab without the experience of being on Team Firewatch.
And then was it, I guess, doing like a little bit of writing there that you wanted to jump more into the writing side, or you still did some programming and stuff on Neo Cab?
I kind of did a little bit of everything on Neo Cab, for better or for worse. So I did write a couple of rides. I definitely was in the room, you know, both giving feedback on the stories and the edits from the team, as well as then actually like wiring a bunch of the lines into the game. Like that process of what I learned from wiring up a lot of Sean Vandeman's writing from Firewatch was really instrumental in terms of like figuring out the pacing and figuring out how to make choices feel like really impactful, and like they could branch the story massively without actually creating the chaos. And, you know, that sort of like problem. I learned a lot, all of that from Sean, really. And so I was able to like lend that on NeoCab. But really the game, the feeling was also, it was imperative that we trust the writers to like use their own voice and figure out the characters themselves, to, you know, especially to give the feeling of like a big diverse game where total strangers are jumping into the bank. That's for that, you kind of need a bunch of diverse voices in the room, and like more than just a couple of you know, white dudes writing the whole thing. So yeah, I knew I wanted to contribute a little bit of writing in NeoCab, but mostly it was about like holding the project together and keeping it moving along.
Yeah. Well, something cool I noticed in NeoCab when I was playing it was like if she was too mad, you couldn't choose the thing that she wouldn't say at that point. In a lot of games, you're like,
you couldn't be
I want to,
peaceful and chill.
like,
Yeah.
I just want to fix this. I don't want them to get mad, and it lets you do it. In this game, it's like, no, she's too mad to say that. And that's really cool. That's something I've never really seen before.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it was that's the feel, we call that the feel grid system, and it was something we hadn't seen before either. And it's something I actually think we only scratched the surface of what could be done with that. But I do sometimes think I should like open source the code behind the feel grid, because there's so much to be done, you know, with in terms of if you successfully flirt through a conversation, and so you're feeling great, top of the world, like you should be now able to ask that person out on a date. Whereas if you were feeling depressed and sad, you should be blocked, you know. Like I think that's true for a lot of us. If we're feeling if we're feeling self-conscious and sad, we wouldn't be able to work up the courage, right? There's a bazillion examples of how choice-based dialogue could fork and respond to emotional systems like that. So and I've seen a couple games start scratching the surface on that since, but part of me is just like, by the time we built it fully out, we could only get so much juice out of it. I think there's still a lot more juice, even for a completely different story. Doesn't even have to be set in the future with the wearable emotions bracelet. It could be, you know, there's other ways of surfacing that emotional information to the player that could probably be just as successful, not more. So if anyone out there is listening, I say take a crack at it.
Yeah. And do you have your own studio or company, or are you more like a freelancer or contractor when it comes to these games? Or NeoCab, you came up with the idea with someone, like you were in the initial team, I guess?
NeoCab, I started a company to make the game and assemble the team myself. And that company still exists, and Neo Cab is still like selling
Yeah.
various places. So, and if I make another game, it'll probably be under the Chance Agency brand.
Mhm.
But I will say that like the process of making a game like that is so takes so much out of you. I really needed a break after it was done. And you don't really even get the break. Something to understand out there is like, because I also wrote code and did game design and helped like ship the code, etc. The moment you're done, you're still not done. You're
Yeah, there's
actually, you're
still
feeling,
more going on. It's
bug
not like
reports and updates. Like Apple's like, hey, new Apple Silicon. It's like,
oh,
okay, I guess I'll figure out how to make my game run on this entirely new architecture. So yeah, this is all a long way of saying Chance Agency will probably rise again. There will be another game, but I'm still in the process of sort of like taking a sabbatical and chilling out and recovering.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think of, I guess, the different platforms too, how things can change all the time. Like back in the day, things were released and just sent out. It's like, if there's a problem, there's a problem. That's what you have.
Totally. Yeah, the old gold master thing,
Mhm.
which is in some ways sounds harder, but in some ways sounds easier, right? Because you're building towards one deadline you're completely sure about, and not half the time like people rush out like a lot of big bugs at launch could be caused by the day one patch,
Yeah.
not solved by it, right? The day one patch solved one bug and opened up another.
Mhm.
And yeah, the other thing that's really crazy these days is like you're often, if you really want success, you want to ship your game at launch with as many localizations as you can, which is a huge undertaking that costs money and time and complexity. And you want to launch on day one on as many platforms as you can. And like making NeoCab work on an iPhone with touch, a Nintendo Switch with Joy-Cons
Mhm.
And touch, Apple TV with the little remote,
Yeah.
and Mac and PC with mouse and keyboard. Like that's a ton of engineering and game design work to make that one. Oh, and not to mention, how about like making your UI text the right size if you're playing it like this in bed and on a TV you're 15 feet away from. So yeah, in some ways, game dev, even for like a relatively like simple game, like the systems wise, NeoCab is simple. It's so much more work in that way than like I can imagine working on a LucasArts game in like 1992, where at least you're like, we're shipping this on English, on PC in English.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now there's so many different things, even the languages or just everything.
Yeah, it's so
Mhm.
much.
And then have you always been a writer and into writing?
Yeah, I have always enjoyed writing and creative writing and
Mhm.
essay writing. Um, and it's something I'm trying to get back into again, outside of games, but having a bit of the old writer's block
Yeah.
recently. So I'm finding myself in Unity again, wiring up weird game prototypes instead.
Mhm.
But yeah, I love writing and would hope to do more of it.
And did you do before all this? Were you writing, I guess, project like things for yourself more, or did you have like writing projects like for work
Um,
kind of things?
no, I was a programmer, and I
Okay.
will say that for like, I was a programmer for basically 10 years, and after a day of coding, you really do not have the brain cells to
Yeah.
rub together for writing, and vice versa. I think writing takes just as much out of you, and there's no way you could write productive code at the end of a day of writing. So yeah, I mean that's something I think about a lot when I think about another game. Is if you did want to write and code it, you'd have to be prepared for a lot of discipline to keep
Mhm.
those two things separate and interleaved. And also, I think about a Lucas Pope type of game where like he knows exactly what he wants to work on, but then he spends like 5 to 7 years on a
Yeah.
project. Worth it at the end of the day. His work is so great, but
Mhm.
that's something I'm thinking about, is like, especially like, am I able to give myself that much time between games is a big question.
Mhm. And then did you just go to school for programming or something like that? Or are you
I am
self-taught?
I'm a largely self-taught. Yeah, I'm a
Okay.
film school dropout,
Nice.
and then got into programming through the like open source
Hmm.
Linux and Ruby scene, and then because I kind of had a lifelong being drawn to it, but I never. It was always so lame,
Hmm.
like Windows programming. When you're like a film nerd, you're like, why the hell would I want to do this? And it was only, yeah, once I saw like web, there was like kind of the web 2.0 era when small teams were making really cool like genre changing social apps like Twitter, like Blogger, like all the stuff that was going on in the like mid early zeros, that I was like, oh, coding is amazing. I want to do this.
Hmm.
So I'm lucky that I had the right friends and the right like job opportunities to learn as I grew, and sort of like in some ways, like at the time at least, it was like getting paid to go to college, like I was constantly being given new challenges, but rather than like run up massive debts to a school, or like in student loans, I was like getting a steady paycheck. So that was
Hmm.
really great.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
even like I talked to someone who's maybe in his 50s the other day, or 40s or 50s, who makes games, and he went to school for web design back in the day. Like he still had to get out of there, and then like you have to learn everything as everything's changing on your own anyway. So sometimes it's better to just start on your own and learn by doing stuff.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Totally.
Things are just always changing.
Hmm. They are. They are. It's that's one of the downsides of being an engineer is if you like sit on your hands for a few years, sometimes it can feel like you have to start from scratch. And
Hmm.
that's not actually true. A lot of the like thinking skills and basic like low level things you need to learn,
Yeah.
the like things you need to learn in order to learn a new thing, those don't change. But yeah, like the code styles move so fast, and you do have to like learn a bunch of new things from scratch.
Hmm. Um, you think any of your, I guess, your real life experiences or stuff translated into NeoCab?
Absolutely.
Like it is
Yeah.
a game in the future, but I guess the story and stuff can come from your real life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it's true for me, and it's also true for all of the writers. Every one of the writers wrote, put some of themselves into the game. Um, but I can only speak for me, and I want to
Hmm.
share, the details of other folks' experiences. But yeah, I mean, in part, NeoCAD came as a response to working in big tech, seeing Twitter grow to this like huge
Yeah.
amount of cultural responsibility and importance, and realizing at the end that we've been at times pretty careless, or at least like just not fully paying attention to the weight of the responsibility there. And and that I felt like our work was like in some ways like it paled in, at least like we got things wrong, absolutely, but most of the people there who I knew, I was like, your heart is in the right place, you're
Hmm.
trying, but the real thing that like one of the things that made us want to make NeoCab was like the rise of Uber, and how clearly like uh, amoral it seemed like that company was, and how eager to completely disrupt the lives of like people who are struggling, and all in this like very transparent capitalist scheme to like get everyone on board with the system, then suppress wages, and then like eventually fire everybody and replace them with like robots
Hmm.
that would track everybody. So like that whole angle was like felt like very close to me, and like a story I could tell. And then there's also just lots of little like personal moments that are sprinkled in here and there, throughout the game. But I think it's probably best to just leave those up to chance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I bet starting with Twitter when it was a small thing and seeing stuff happen like that, and like they didn't know, I guess, a lot of it.
Oh
Like when
yeah.
Uber started, or the companies that start now, they know from experience from like other companies what they went through. Like, oh, we shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah. Yeah. Twitter and Facebook especially, I think didn't, they want like, and but actually, so I'm wearing my Netflix hat because I
Yeah.
worked at Netflix recently, but today is the big
Hmm.
walkout. So just spreading the word
Yeah.
solidarity for my trans Netflix friends,
Hmm.
but and allies, etc. But like Yeah, Netflix has the same thing as Twitter and Facebook, where when it's good press about how Twitter, Facebook, Netflix is like changing the world for the better, we lap it up, we share it, we retweet it, we own it. We tell every employee, you should feel proud for this. But when the bad press comes and says, like, Twitter is increasing harassment of women, or Facebook is increasing the spread of dangerous misinformation, or sometimes actual genocide, then we're like, oh, no. This is those are the bad people doing that. Facebook is just a neutral platform. So it's that wanting to have it both ways thing that I think is so endemic to Silicon Valley. You want all the benefits of being like a force for good, change the world, without any of the responsibilities of being, like, say, a publisher or a TV or a movie studio, or anything like that.
Yeah, like we're not behind it. We're just like giving them the platform,
right?
Instead
Right,
we're
and
like
we're not
funding them or
responsible.
anything.
Exactly, and free, hashtag free speech or whatever. When it's like, free speech exists on the internet, and it should exist on the internet. I think that anyone who wants to host their own website with their own hateful views, like, should be allowed to. I think that's super important. I don't think that I don't think that the megaphone platforms have a responsibility to provide that megaphone. Obviously, there's like a bazillion things still to work out about how we find that balance between like individual freedom and corporate control and the rights of, like, oppressed and minority people. Like, there's so much to figure out. My main point was, like, I know for sure we weren't thinking about it enough at Twitter. And I know from friends at Google and Facebook, it's the same than YouTube. It's like the same thing. Everyone's very, very reactive there. It's like, let's wait until there's a crisis
Until
in
it
the
gets
press.
bad.
Yeah, exactly.
To
Yeah.
try to fix it instead of
Right.
like, hopefully they won't notice.
Yeah, right. And I was guilty of that too. That's when I was there, I definitely was like a bit eye rolly, I think, at times, especially in the early years. You kind of don't want to believe it's that bad, and until it's like so obvious that you can't ignore it.
Well, there's also, I guess, the quick news cycle now, that when bad things happen, sometimes they're washed away really fast by something else or something good.
Yeah.
Maybe the next good thing that comes instead.
Totally. Absolutely. And the platforms also seem to like certain types of bad news better than others. Like, we love getting outraged about things, or at the very least, the algorithm loves the way we get outraged about things. But you could definitely notice that even if you spent all day being outraged on social media, as there are so many people who do across the political spectrum, very often it's about what's on TV, or someone was rude to a cop at Starbucks in a town outside of St. Louis, Missouri. Things like this, where you're just like, not sure if you're going to be politically active right now. Like, this is where your energy, this is the injustice your energy is best spent towards. But yeah, not a very controversial take, I know. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, I guess, well, now you said you're kind of taking a break. And
Yeah, a little
I mean,
bit,
there's still Neo Cab stuff going on, but is there other projects you're working on that maybe aren't in games, or separate stuff, or it's mainly just taking a break?
I've got so I worked on one cool thing at Netflix. I worked on a couple cool things at Netflix, but one super cool thing I was the lead designer on. I'm unfortunately not allowed to talk about yet, but I will definitely be shouting about when it launches, whenever that might be. But I was on the interactive experiences teams at Netflix, like best known from the folks who do the interactive Black Mirror episode Bandersnatch. So it was cool to be able to use narrative design techniques there in a totally new realm, where I was like working directly with showrunners and TV writers and film writers on how to like make branching stories out of in a traditionally linear medium. So that was super awesome. I'm really happy to have that opportunity, and I'm excited about what's going to launch someday.
Yeah.
But also it made me hungry to work, like eager to go back to games, because for all the difficulties of shipping software on a bunch of platforms like we were talking about earlier, it's also still like the space for innovation. Like, if you're making a film for Netflix, you can innovate as long as it's like, 4K resolution, 16:9 aspect ratio, Dolby sound, 22 to 200 minutes, like it's like of linear content, like
Yeah.
we know what those media are now. And games is still like constantly, we're still inventing new whole genres every couple of years, and combining old genres and finding new ways to deepen and extend old forms. So like, and when you're working in a game engine, the freedom is there, to do almost anything. So that's sort of where my heart is, and I am starting to dip my toe back into like prototyping some ideas. And yeah, and in some ways I think there's a part of me that's like, if I could find an idea I love enough to be like, I will spend a Lucas Pope sized amount of time to make this, like that, I will make it. But until I do, it's best not to like overcommit to anything.
Yeah. No, it is super cool that like, I guess some of my favorite games in the same year could have been like God of War, like a huge AAA game, but also like Celeste. That's like a small indie title that looks like something
Amazing.
old, but
Yeah.
it's just beautiful and it feels really cool.
Yeah. Fun fact, Paolo Cericchio, who I mentioned earlier, who is our graphics artist on Firewatch, was also a graphics lead on God of War. So if both of those games look phenomenal, there's a reason. Shout out to Paolo.
That's cool.
But yeah, I hear you. Yeah, like Celeste was such a triumph and can make you feel things despite having like a fraction of the art budget and dev team. I love that.
Yeah, because if it happens in movies, someone will be like, "Oh, this is a crappy movie." Like if they use the old technology in a movie versus like a big Avengers movie or something huge like that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's weird actually. Now that you mention, I'm like, there's almost a better market for indie games than indie film right now. It feels like to me. Maybe this is like, maybe I'm thinking about this wrong, because maybe if you think about Netflix, it is filled with, what we might used to call indie films, lower budget films without a lot of studio oversight. I do think that stuff exists on Netflix. So
yeah.
But yeah, indie dev it still feels like there's a chance for a small team to break through, however small, and that's wonderful that that's still possible. Yeah.
I wanted to ask if you have any, I guess, dream projects or maybe even dream IP to work with for a game or anything.
Oh wow, yeah. I mean, the game I was most floored by in the last couple of years is Disco Elysium. I would give anything to work on that project or work on whatever they do next, or like just be a fly on the wall, honestly, consult on narrative design, just shoot the shit, write a character, dialogue tree, any of that stuff. Studio Zaum, I don't know, you said, get at me. What else, like dream IPs? I'm shocked there's an Indiana Jones game in development again. I would do anything to write for that. There's so much, or do design work. There's so much like great stuff to do in Indiana Jones games. Like probably the first narrative game I ever played was Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, by Lucasfilm Games at the time. I think it was before it was LucasArts. And man, it's still great. That game is amazing. And Fate of Atlantis, so good. So yeah, that'll be my answer. I'd love to do Indiana Jones someday.
Yeah. Because I feel like it'd be cool to see. I keep thinking like they're making all these Star Wars games, but to see Star Wars indie type games, like a Metroidvania Star Wars game or something like.
Totally. I mean, like
when they start doing stuff like that,
a physics puzzler like type of game, or even just like, I mean, Tomb Raider and Uncharted are both obviously heavily inspired by Indiana Jones IP. Why have we never had a game like that? It boggles the mind. Maybe that's what the new one will be. I actually don't remember much about which studio is working on it, and so maybe I'm just trying to like tune it out so it's not a disappointment. But well, yeah, I mean, what do you think? What would be the dream genre for an Indiana Jones IP?
Yeah, I guess like Uncharted, because Uncharted made me go back and watch the movies and become like obsessed with Indiana Jones again. It was
nice.
When I started playing Uncharted, then I'm in Florida, so I went to Disney and watched the Indiana Jones stunt show again.
Oh, cool.
And I became like all obsessed with Indiana Jones for a while.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I hope the studios realize that there's nothing that makes you more obsessed with an IP than like being that hero, like I think it's like, it's probably not a coincidence that the reason Spider-Man has been
like Sunset Overdrive.
Yeah. Um,
hmm
like those IPs like have been made much bigger by either direct adaptations or like inspired by
hmm
games. Yeah. I actually
Yeah,
haven't played
people.
a Sunset Overdrive.
I never. No, I
What
played it
is it?
for a few minutes at a friend's house, but I remember it felt like it could have been Spider-Man because you're jumping around like that. I don't think he didn't have webs
Ah,
or anything, but it used like the mechanics and they just.
oh, interesting. Well, so okay, I should play this. It looks
hmm
dope. It's also by Insomniac Games,
Yeah,
who made Spider-Man. And even though there have been some bad Spider-Man games for
yeah.
sure, there's also been some really great. I think there was like a really excellent Spider-Man game of the
It's
early
like a
PS3 era.
PlayStation or
Yeah,
PS2
maybe it's PS2.
Spider-Man
Yeah,
2 or something.
yeah, Spider-Man 2. Yeah, it was like when you go back and look at it, you're like, oh, this actually
hmm
looks great. I'm amazed they were able to do this on the hardware. And like it's not as good as the Insomniac game,
Yeah.
which is like, but it's like it's getting there, you know? It's certainly more fun than like trying to imagine doing like Superman character
hmm
movement, like you know. Um, anyway, yeah, I think it's I love Insomniac's whole thing, and they do a great job of blending narrative design into the game in a way where it rewards people who love it and it satisfies people who merely tolerate it. And yeah,
Yeah.
they do great work.
I remember playing the first Spider-Man from Insomniac and thinking like this feels like what that Spider-Man 2 game felt like back then to me. And I watch a YouTube video, I'm like, well, it doesn't look like it, but like that's how it felt when I played it.
Yeah,
Like it felt like this is awesome. I think in the
yeah.
old game he was like swinging off of like clouds and stuff.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. That's I don't know actually how that's supposed to
Mhm.
work, but probably a good for the game. Oh wow, I'm looking at the Sunset Overdrive trailer. It looks dope. When did this come
Yeah,
out?
it was on I think an early Xbox One game
Huh.
maybe because my
Wow,
friend had it
cool.
and I played it at his house because I never had the Xbox One. I think now it's
Yeah.
on PC and I don't know if they'll bring it to PlayStation because they own Insomniac
Yeah, I don't think they do they
yeah,
own Insomniac? Or they maybe they just have a very
or
close
Sony
working
does.
relationship. Yeah.
hmm
Oh, I can see that for sure.
They do like a remaster.
Yeah. And Sony has controlled the Spider-Man IP for ages, right? And
hmm
still does, I think. Um, yeah.
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 I want to ask you about yourself too, I guess,
Hmm.
like your early life with games and your introduction, or maybe the early consoles you started with and
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
big
So this will
games you
date
remember playing.
me. Yeah. But I was an NES kid.
hmm
Growing up in Brooklyn, it was like the hot thing to own, and like the parents didn't understand it. Video games were brand new. I never knew any kid who had an Atari, but it was like every single kid I knew either had a NES or was over at my house or our friends' houses like playing NES. It's like so the original like canon of like Mario 1, 2, 3, Metroid. What were the other big ones that are like Ninja Gaiden? Obviously like Tetris, like
hmm
all of those games I was like obsessed with in its own way. And then early PC games, like I mean everything I loved it all, man. Like Incredible Machine, Lemmings,
Yeah,
uh,
Lemmings.
Wolfenstein, Doom, Quake, like all the LucasArts games. I was obsessed. I was probably obsessed with the LucasArts games more than anything. Day of the Tentacle, Maniac Mansion, Sam and Max, Indiana Jones, like The Dig. All of those like were probably my like pinnacle. And maybe that's why I still love storytelling heavy games, even if I can't really bring myself to play most like puzzly adventure games anymore for some reason. But I love games with like strong stories and characters. Um, and then like I loved that back then it was also I was able to like dabble with making games like ZZT
hmm
made by one Tim Sweeney of Epic Mega Games. Was like I spent so much time with that. I did school projects in ZZT. You could still find some of those games online, which I love that the community has preserved. It's like weird school project games I made and put on AOL as a 12-year-old. What and then like but then I also like went through a big like fallow period where I barely played any video games for like the GameCube
Oh.
era. And then even in the Wii era, it was always like I was grinding so hard to like make it as a programmer
Mhm.
that like I basically skipped like almost 10 years of games. Like I never played any Elder Scrolls.
No.
Um, yeah. What like so I had to kind of I'm still like kind of going back and backfilling some of those things.
Me
Yeah.
too. Yeah, I missed a few consoles, I guess, and then I find games from them I might
Yeah.
not played, or they're like releasing a new one. I'm like, oh, I always heard this was cool, and I should try to find the old one or a way to play it.
Right. Right. Totally. God, I
Mhm.
should reach out to like my friend who like lent me a PS3 just so I could play The Last of Us because I
Oh.
really had no clue what was possible in games and what a gap to like to hit pause in like the Wii era and then to like play The Last of Us. I just had no idea. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I played Last of Us remastered on PS4 because I didn't have a PS3. That and then
Yeah.
Uncharted I got into with
Yeah.
PS4. But those were all
Yeah.
games I missed because I had the 360. But I think in the 360 I was mostly playing like Madden and Call of Duty, like in
Hmm.
college.
Yeah, I skipped that whole I skipped
Mhm.
X basically every Xbox as well. So like I never did Call of Duty. The last like arena shooter I played was probably like Unreal Tournament. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I was in college during Halo 2 came out my freshman year. So everyone had Xboxes and was playing Halo. And then the night Halo 2 came out, we all like went, a bunch of us in this dorm went to get it at like GameStop.
Yeah.
We came back at midnight and everyone was like in everyone's rooms playing over the LAN,
Nice.
like the
That's
local
great.
area connection.
Yeah. Yeah, you get the best ping times
Yeah.
then. And it's also, I mean, how much fun is it to kill someone and just
No, and then we would
see them smash their keyboard on the
yeah, we
server?
knew everyone by
Yeah.
like their gamer tag in the in the building that we lived in.
Totally.
It
Well,
was
that's
fun.
funny. That reminds me of working at Twitter. Everyone like the
Oh,
CEO would call you by your Twitter
by your Twitter
handle.
name.
Yeah, it's really funny. Yeah.
I guess did you have arcades growing up in Brooklyn that you went to,
Yeah.
or
Oh yeah. I love the arcades. So yeah, Street Fighter 2, Mortal Kombat 2 were probably favorites. Um, I mean, I will still like sit down and pour pop quarters into like Ms. Pac-Man.
Mhm.
That yeah is like a perfectly designed game. Um, what else? I loved the 90s for arcades because there was a lot of like innovation there, right? From like DDR to like weird Namco games. I remember this one called Prop Cycle,
Mhm.
which let you like sort of like pedal a flying bicycle
Oh,
and like lean to steer and stuff. Like it
I
was just
think
a
I
lot
saw
of
that.
cool stuff. Yeah.
Yeah,
Time
or the
Crisis.
yeah
Yeah.
Time Crisis and the gun ones.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if that'll ever come back or if like it'll come back through VR or
Yeah,
something. Yeah.
I think now we have arcades that are more retro arcades,
Right.
or they have the
Right.
game zone or game whatever that it's like they have that crazy thing that lifts you in the air and like those crazy
I
futurist
haven't
games.
played that. That sounds dope.
There was
I
one
want to
that
try
was
that.
like on a wall, and I
Mm.
think you're in chairs that are just going up and down shooting at this giant screen. And they had like
Sounds awesome.
the racing games that have like a whole car's body and everyone's racing next to each other.
Yeah, those are great. Yep. I remember MechWarrior used to have the MechWarrior brand had like physical locations in California. When I used to, grew up on the East Coast, and so when I'd come
Mhm.
and visit family out in like Sacramento area, yeah, you go to a strip mall and then like they had they had it like built out as if in the MechWarrior world, and like everything was in universe, and they'd address you as a pilot, and then you'd like sit in like a moving
Mhm.
thing and play a network like networking. That stuff was
That's
awesome.
cool.
Yeah. Clearly as a business model, it didn't last for very long, but
Mm.
it was dope.
They could do a lot of cool stuff today with all this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just probably super expensive now.
Yeah, it's weird because
Like
you'd think
things.
like the like certain aspects of game dev have gotten so much cheaper and so much
Hmm.
easier and so much more approachable. Um, and then of course the hardware has gotten much faster and memory's gotten bigger. So in theory, it should be easier than ever to make games like that, but then at the same time, it doesn't quite feel that way. I'm still kind of, but it's probably economic reasons that are beyond me, but something feels not quite right about that.
Mhm. Mhm. And are your favorite types of games to play more narrative driven games, or do you just like games that you can zone out and play
Oh
sometimes
no,
too?
I like something, I need something that like grabs me. And so I love games that have a strong story, but not exclusively. Like I
Mhm.
love I played a lot of Dead Cells,
Yeah.
and that game has like a tone and a vibe and like little lore bits, but like, you know, ultimately it's not about that.
Mhm.
And I love it regardless. Um but like I loved Deathloop. I just
Yeah, I've been
finished.
playing Deathloop.
So good,
It's
right?
super cool.
Yeah,
I,
and they do a great job. I mean, that is one of the best examples. It's sort of probably the best first-person shooter story I can remember, where
mhm.
the core mechanics are deeply tied into the story, and some of the most compelling game moments are like a great blend of like merging player identities and player character identities into something that feels like cohesive and like it fits. So yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I love the Souls series. I just replayed uh the Demon Souls remake, and like
Mhm.
I'm gonna like set aside like 2 weeks to play Elden Ring when it comes out in February. Yeah, it's like a smattering. How about you? What are your
Yeah.
like your favorite things to play these days?
Deathloop is one of my favorites right now. I've been playing it every night. Like I do one run or two runs, but it was
Mm-hmm.
something happened the other night, or I was able to finally like suck out the residium from things. But that
Mm-hmm.
was like a big moment. I was like, this is so cool. Like I just you're like learning things as you're playing, which is cool.
Yeah, you got a lot of cool discoveries ahead of you. I'll
Hmm.
just say that.
And
Yeah.
then I started Metroid Dread on the
Yep, I've been
Switch
playing that
because
too.
I feel like I've always been into Metroidvanias, but I never played that much Metroid, like
Yeah,
actual Metroid games. I did Castlevania as a kid,
yeah, yeah.
but I
I
missed
love the
out.
original Metroid as a kid so much, and then I played the the Metroid 2 remake that dropped on 3DS the
The
other
DS,
year.
I
Yeah,
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 I
the
borrowed
DS.
that from a friend and played
Yeah,
on
it was good.
2DS. But that
Yeah.
was I was
Um,
like I've been missing out on these games because I love this style of game. I just never got into like the original
right, right. And
one.
like a roguelike, it became one of those things where people
Yeah.
compare it to things that are so different, you like lose track of like what was made the original thing so good. Yeah, Dread finally clicked for me last night.
Hmm.
I was almost ready to put it down, where I was like, this doesn't feel that much better than like Metroid 2, which I just played. And I think now I realize they've just been really taking it. It's one of those games where they integrate all the tutorial into the game. So if
Yeah.
you've played a lot of the genre, you're like, this is so slow. But
Hmm.
it's because you're like, oh, I'm still playing the tutorial, and it's just not marked as such, you know? But
Yeah.
basically, until you get the morph ball in that game,
Yeah. I
like,
got the morph ball the other day. I think so.
yeah, I feel like it's barely even started.
Hmm.
But now I'm into it. Yeah.
Yeah. But I feel like every time I get stuck and I start going around in circles and I'm about to quit, then I find something. I'm like, oh, this, I'm gonna keep going now.
Yeah,
And then the
totally. You have
morph
to
ball was
accept.
like, do I have to go back now to every like the other parts and find stuff, or do I wait until I get more powers
Yeah.
and things?
Yeah. Yeah, they've done some really good level design there with pretty strongly nudging you where you should go and
Hmm.
making it feel like you think it's your choice to go that way. But really, I've been looking at it, I was like, oh, you're absolutely forcing me to teleport to a specific place now. And then that is putting me in what feels like a big branching maze, but it's actually a railroad that's leading me to teleport back. And like, I see what you're doing. It's very, very clever. Yeah.
And then what are you into? I guess outside of gaming and programming.
Yeah, I've got a year-and-a-half-year-old son,
Okay.
my first, and so I've been spending lots of time with him. He's awesome. Um, and I've been during the pandemic, I've been making my own like liqueurs,
Oh, that's cool.
infusions, and yeah, like learning how to like draw the tasty chemicals out of herbs and roots and stuff.
Hmm.
So that's cool. My eventual goal is to make my own improved Campari.
Oh, that's cool. I've
Yeah.
infused vodkas and stuff, but I never
Oh, nice.
done stuff
What's
like
your
that.
favorite recipe or your favorite one you've made?
lately I just because I bake a lot and cook a lot, so I realized that vanilla extract is just vodka with a bunch of vanilla beans in it. So I made my own, and
Hmm.
then I started using
Nice.
it for like coffee martinis to have a vanilla vodka in it.
That sounds awesome.
It's
That sounds
good.
really good. Wow, I've never tried a coffee martini. So
Hmm.
is it like a coffee liqueur?
It's coffee liqueur. You can use like an espresso or a cold brew. I usually have
Mhm,
cold brew that I make for the week, so I'll
mhm.
use some of that, and then
Nice. Sounds awesome.
vodka. I think that's it.
Dope. Well,
Hmm.
and a little splash of your vanilla
Yeah.
too, right? Yeah, nice.
Hmm.
Cool.
Um, I guess I was gonna ask last what you're currently playing or playing next, but you just finished Deathloop and you're playing Metroid Dread.
Yeah, I'll say the next one I'm got queued up is I really want to play Sable.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that
that's
one
and
looks
I
really cool.
yeah, I had a good chance to sync up with those devs while we're making Neo Cab, and they Kim Belair and her group who
Hmm.
were the Neo Cab are also working on Sable. And so they threw me a dev code, and I'm excited to finally dive into it. Uh, yeah, that's my next big one, I'd say.
And are you saving any games that you've missed out on to play, or is
Oh
it just a
gosh,
backlog of
it's
games that you?
such a backlog, especially as someone interested in narrative design. It's like I still haven't played Planescape Torment, so I still need to play that. But I've like played so many things that cited as a like an inspiration. And I was like, well, do I need to play this? But like, I'm gonna play it. I've heard so many good people I trust
Mhm.
in the space tell me it's great, so I'm definitely gonna go back and play it. Um, what else have I been like saving? I actually have like a list in my notebook somewhere, but I'm on my next. Some of my next game ideas are related to like have crafting mechanics
Mhm.
integrated, and I'm really interested in playing games with actually good, meaningful crafting mechanics, and maybe even playing a few ones that suck, so I can learn what not to do. But
Yeah.
any thoughts there? Have you ever played a game where you're like, or how do you like? How do you feel about crafting in general? And are there games that are like exemplary for you?
Um, I know in The Last of Us, I feel like when it's not too much, but it's fun to do.
Yeah,
There's some
super
games that it's like
minimalist.
too much, and you
Yeah,
like find stuff, and you're like, can I use this for anything? And you don't really know.
totally.
And Breath of the
Yeah,
Wild, I loved cooking in Breath of the Wild.
totally. Yeah, that was wonderful.
Hmm.
Yeah, in both of those games, the crafting is it's so different between the two, right? Like The Last of Us has like three root materials, right? It's like three or
Hmm.
four base materials, and then like I don't know, 10 things you can make, but each one, but and then you can hold so few of each one. So
Yeah.
it's but it's just enough to put you in the mind of Joel, uh, like with why he's gathering this stuff, why he's looting, what he's making decisions like, right, I can make a healing thing or Molotov, but not both. Like it's
Yeah.
perfect. Yeah. But also not very creative. So like I'm also interested in like games like Spiritfarer did a really cool, has been doing really, I haven't still haven't finished it, but
Hmm.
I really like how their crafting process, each like crafting module is its own little mini game that if so it's like Breath of the Wild, like the one downside for me is that like you spend so much time waiting
Yeah.
for in Spiritfarer you're actually playing a little mini game, and the better you
To
do at
make
it, the
stuff.
better the yield.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's cool.
yeah, I'm really interested in that aspect.
Hmm.
Yeah,
In Animal Crossing, there was a lot of crafting, but it was a pain. Like I had a
yeah, such
notebook
a
that I would
pain.
write stuff down. Like, what do I need to make this?
Yeah, and there's so much spending so much time in the menus, popping in and out and in and out.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then of course, like almost none of the items had any like practical application in the game, so it very much just felt like you're just ordering from a catalog.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
You know what? It's done well in a lot of games, but then it is also like some games you're like I need to craft things, but I don't know what to do, or
right. How do you
or
tutorialize
there's
it?
just
Like,
too many items, so you don't even know what you're looking for.
right. Yeah, yeah. Minecraft has that like it relies both on the community to like bootstrap someone else, which I think is actually probably a big part, like a hidden part of its success is it's as much fun to teach someone Minecraft
Mhm.
as it is to play it, maybe more fun. And so you're like, you kind of have, it's like like an evangelical religion almost, where people are like, I have to show you Minecraft, and then they teach you the recipes. So it's, I almost feel like if there was a robust tutorial system in there, which they probably just never built because they didn't at first have time, and then eventually they realized like, oh, this game is better without a tutorial, without a recipe book. So I think of that a lot. And then they did a cool job of making the recipes like intuitive, using the block system, like somewhat intuitive. Like you can mess around with it and like presumably start to invent your own recipes. But
Mhm.
yeah, that's also
Yeah.
really well done.
Oh, and have you thought of, I guess, for your kid, what you're gonna show them first, the old games or like what you
I
grew up with,
love that
or
idea. Yeah, Andy Bio is the guy I know who did that with his kid, and it
Mhm.
seems to have worked. I feel like he's been doing it for his kid's like getting up there now in ages. Like he's not an old man, but like he's able to play anything now.
Yeah, I
But
have
it,
nephews that are 5 and 10, but
mhm.
they have their Switches or they had DSs, but then I showed them my older games too.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the idea of like, let's play these games together and watch the progression for a
Hmm.
variety of reasons. But then I also have to recognize that it's like, I don't want to be a hypocrite and being like, I get to play Deathloop and you have to play Super Mario 2.
Yeah.
So it's only if I'm willing to myself like constrain my, which so far I haven't done, like
Hmm.
he's seen me play Metroid Dread and stuff. So yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. No, it's also cool. My nephew loves everything Kirby now, but all the new games. And I went to SuperCon here well, now probably a month ago or something,
Mhm.
and I
Where are you
found
based
some
out of again?
in Miami.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
But I found some Game Boy games, and I have a Game Boy Color, but the only game I had was Tetris, so I bought a Kirby game and let him play it. And be like, this is what I used to play of Kirby. This is what Kirby used to be. So it was
Nice.
cool to
Was
see
it
him
on
play
an
it.
original like grayscale Game Boy?
I don't know. I have this color that I borrowed
Oh,
from my
neat.
friend's little brother.
That's
And
cool. That's
then
such a great era.
I don't remember if these are the game or about Home Alone. That was a game I've had that I used to
Yeah.
have. Tetris I already had, and then
Those
Pac-Man.
Kirby games feel way better than they have any
Yeah,
right
like
to,
Kirby's
given the
Dream Land.
hardware.
It,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
feels like, yeah, it feels just as good as playing the on the Switch, the NES or like Super NES ones.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I didn't play Kirby when it was new, but yeah, as like a retro game enthusiast, I've did, and I'm always like, oh, this character feels better than Mario ever
Hmm.
did. Like it's those games are great. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. Just like seeing all the old games again, or even I found my old collection of NES games, and I think there was Monster Party was one game that I saw, and I was like, "What is this? I don't remember this." And I looked up a YouTube video and saw like 2 seconds of gameplay, and I was like, "I
Oh,
totally remember this."
I'm looking this up right now. Monster Party
Like I
images.
just remember because we had it and we played it. I guess maybe I don't know if it was like a crappy game no one had because I had a bunch of those too.
Oh yeah. I mean, this was also the Blockbuster era, right? So
Yeah,
it was that cool thing, which actually maybe kids have a little even less of now, of being able to try something new every weekend.
yeah.
And then you would obsessively play nothing but that game because you had so little time with it.
Hmm.
And then get to try something new. Like I think, I mean, it's a funny, like now that I think, especially given how hard games were in the NES era, it means I played like the first hour of like hundreds of games
Yeah.
and finished very, very few of them.
Hmm.
Wow, Monster Party looks amazing. I did not play this. I wonder why. Bandai.
Hmm.
The colors and the graphics are great. They're stunning.
Yeah. No, and there was like the super hard Ninja Turtles game for NES.
Oh, I played the hell out of that.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
then I must have
yeah.
rented it because I like there's some games that I remember owning, but maybe I just rented them because they're not in my collection.
Yeah. Actually, that reminds me. The other funny like thing of that era was like, because there's no internet to like look up reviews for something beforehand.
Yeah,
Sometimes you like rent a game and bring it home, and then like 10 minutes later, you're like, this
yeah,
game is
this was
garbage.
the worst game.
This is unplayable. And then but they would have shipped it anyway. So maybe that's like a good thing to keep in mind as a game dev, of like being like, don't be that guy.
Yeah.
Don't be that company.
No, I had an uncle that would come to town from Puerto Rico and he would buy it. He like bought me 3 games once at Toys R Us. We went and I just picked I picked Shaq Fu because it was Shaq, which I loved back then, but everyone's like, it's a terrible game.
I
But
never
then
played Shaq Fu.
I picked some other fighting game, but it was all based on like the picture on the cartridge or the
Right.
box. You're just like, this looks
Right.
cool.
Yeah, I want to feel like this thing makes me feel. Yeah.
Mhm.
I remember the worst game, one of the worst games I played for NES was Fester's Quest. It was like an Addams Family game
Oh,
before the Addams Family movie even came out. So it must have been a very like low rent IP. It was like garbage. Or the TMNT 1 game was also pretty rough. It wasn't garbage, but I mean,
Mhm.
compared to TMNT 2, it was like not great at all. Or I just saw like, they're expanding the Switch and like Nintendo Online
Yeah,
offerings
for
with like,
N64 and Genesis.
yeah. Echo the Dolphin, I feel like is still such an interesting case where a beautiful game, amazing controls, great story, great music, and then just like they literally didn't play test it and they set the difficulty. The only thing I can explain is that they set the devs set the difficulty to his own comfort level,
Mhm.
which is like always the wrong move because you know how to play your game inside and out after developing it for years, right? So
Yeah.
like it's like I can still barely. It's like harder than Dark Souls. That game is nobody has seen the end of that game without cheats.
No, I remember
Yeah,
playing it just because my friends had Genesis. I always had Nintendo consoles, but I remember playing it at friends' houses and not really knowing what I was doing, but I thought it just looked really cool. And it was like you're a dolphin, you're swimming.
it's
It's just
so good. They just need to release like a version where they fix the difficulty because it was like, yeah, it wasn't a bad game. Even the level design was like totally parsable. The main
Mhm.
thing was just like while trying to explore and find your way out of the level, you would die. And it was just very unforgiving. Like they could probably just fix it by adding health items or something.
Mhm.
It was just like skewed for the wrong player. Anyway,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's all I got for you today.
Cool. Yeah,
But
let's,
thanks so much for doing this.
yeah, that's a fun chat,
Yeah,
man.
it was really
Thanks
cool
for
to meet
reaching
you
out.
finally.
Yeah. Where are you gonna, where can I find this? Where are you gonna post it?
Yeah, I've been doing them on YouTube and I've been meaning to, I guess, turn them into audio podcasts also, but then I need to probably record an intro since you can't see the people and like the names and everything. So I haven't been had time to do that, but I've been doing it every 2 weeks and I think I have one that's supposed to go up this week or next week, then another one, and then it'll be you.
Cool.
Hmm.
Awesome. Well, I'll look for that. Can I shout out my socials and
Yeah.
then
And I
cool.
put them up at the end usually. Like
Oh,
I put
perfect.
a screen over this and
Okay, awesome. Well,
mhm.
yeah, I mean, I guess if you're ever going audio, I'll just say it for that case.
Yeah.
So yeah, my game is Neo Cab,
Mhm.
at Neo Cab Game on all the Twitters, Instagrams, Facebooks, etc. We're out now on Switch, Steam, Humble, and Apple Arcade.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, and I'm Patrick. So, and you can find me at Hoverbird, pretty much everywhere.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks again. This was super
Mhm.
fun.
Yeah. Well, so nice to meet you and thanks for your time.
Yeah, likewise, man. It was a
Mhm.
pleasure. Keep in
Yeah.
touch.
Good luck.
Thanks,
Bye.
man. Bye.
What? Gross.
No.
Oh, hey, put that down. Seriously, it was you asshole!
Light another firework and it won't be your stereo Iraq.
Oh, fuck you, psycho. Yeah, fuck you.